Most people spend their entire lives chasing happiness, and they never realize the chase itself is what is making them miserable. They buy more, scroll more, achieve more, and somehow still feel empty when the room gets quiet. You know the feeling. Late night, nothing wrong, but something missing. That is not a flaw in you. That is a lie you were taught. Here is the truth no one told you. Happiness is not a destination. It was never waiting at the finish line. And the faster you run toward it, the emptier you start to feel inside. The Stoics knew this thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire and still wrestled with the same weight you feel. Epictetus was born in chains and still found unshakable peace. Seneca faced exile and death threats and still laughed. They were not lucky. They were intentional. In this video, you will learn 12 real, gritty, practical lessons to build a happiness that does not fall apart when life gets hard. Not performative joy, not filtered peace, the kind that stays when you are alone. If you are ready to stop chasing and start building, write this in the comments right now. I build my own peace. One small act, one first step. 12 lessons, one life. Let us go. Lesson 1. Some of the happiest people you have ever met are carrying invisible pain, and somehow they still laugh. Not the polite kind, not the performative chuckle you give to a bad joke. Real laughter. The kind that catches you off guard. The kind that makes your eyes water and your stomach hurt. Epictetus said, "He who laughs at himself never runs out of things to laugh at." Think about that. When you can laugh at your own chaos, you tell the universe something powerful. You tell it, "I see you and I refuse to be crushed." The Stoics were not joyless. Marcus Aurelius wrote with dry wit. He found comedy in the absurdity of human ambition, including his own. And here is what science now confirms. Laughter lowers cortisol. It releases endorphins. It changes your body chemistry like exercise. You are not just feeling better. You are biologically becoming better. So here is your practice. Watch the comedy special you have been putting off. Call the friend who always makes you lose it. Find the absurd in your own mistakes instead of spiraling into shame. Life is genuinely funny sometimes. The traffic, the miscommunications, the fact that you are a temporary arrangement of atoms trying to find purpose. Laugh not because nothing matters. Laugh because laughing is how you stay sane while everything matters. And this is where most people destroy themselves. They forget to breathe. Lesson 2. There is a reason you feel something shift when you step outside. Your shoulders drop. Your breath deepens. The noise in your head gets quieter. That is not imagination. That is biology meeting philosophy. Marcus Aurelius wrote that nowhere can man find a quieter retreat than in his own soul. But he also spent enormous time outdoors. He understood that the outer world shapes the inner world. When you spend time in nature, you are not escaping your life. You are returning to it. The Japanese have a practice called forest bathing. It sounds too gentle to be powerful, but the research is striking. Time among trees lowers blood pressure, reduces anxiety, improves immune function, and elevates mood. No screen can do that. You do not need a mountain, a park, a quiet street lined with trees. A few minutes sitting with your back against something old and rooted. That is enough. The Stoics believed nature was the greatest teacher of acceptance. Seasons change without resistance. Rivers carve their path without complaint. The oak tree does not argue with the wind. It bends, survives, and keeps growing. Try this today. Step outside with no agenda, no podcast, no destination. Just walk. Notice what is above you, around you, beneath your feet. Let the world remind you that it existed long before your problems did, and it will exist long after. That is not nihilism. That is relief. Think about that for a second. Lesson 3. Before you close this video, hear this out. Because be a morning person is probably the most hated advice in self-improvement. But strip away the 5 a.m. club. Strip away the cold plunges and green smoothies. What remains is something the Stoics practiced with deep sincerity. Marcus Aurelius began each morning with a ritual of reflection. Before he was an emperor, before he handled decisions affecting millions, he sat with his thoughts. He wrote, he prepared. He asked himself not what he needed to accomplish that day, but who he needed to be. That distinction changes everything. He wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." That is not a motivation poster. That is a man who knew that mornings are the only moment of the day that truly belong to you. Science agrees. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and clarity, is freshest in the morning. The choices you make before the noise begins are cleaner, calmer, more aligned with who you actually want to be. When you sleep through that window, you hand the first chapter of your day to everyone else. You do not need 4 a.m., you need 10 minutes. Sit quietly. Write one thought. Watch the light change. Set a single intention for the day ahead. Give yourself the gift of beginning on purpose instead of in reaction. The morning is not just the start of your day. In Stoic terms, it is the start of your life. Treat it accordingly. And once you control your mornings, something else changes too. Lesson 4. Seneca said something that should be tattooed on the inside of every procrastinator's wrist. Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Sit with that. Each day is a life. That means each morning you wake up, you have been handed a complete finite story arc. A beginning, a middle, an end. What you do with the middle is entirely up to you. Here is the thing about an unplanned day. It does not give you freedom. It gives you drift. You end up reactive, pulled from one distraction to the next. Emails, notifications, other people's emergencies. And by evening you have that hollow feeling of someone who moved through hours without really living them. The Stoics called this unconscious living, and they considered it one of the great wastes. Planning your days is not about squeezing every drop of productivity. It is about something more human. It is about deciding in advance what matters to you today. A conversation you want to have, a project you want to move forward, a walk you want to take, a book you want to open. When you plan with intention, you tell yourself that your time has value. That quiet self-respect accumulates faster than you think. The Stoic practice of remembering that you will die was not meant to be morbid. It was meant to be clarifying. When you remember that your days are not infinite, suddenly each one feels worth designing. So tonight before you sleep, take 5 minutes. Write down 3 things you intend to do tomorrow. Not a crushing list. 3 things that matter. Then wake up tomorrow and live like you meant it. Here is the part nobody wants to admit. Lesson 5. At some point in your life, something lit you up inside. Maybe it was music, writing, running, painting, building things with your hands, cooking meals that took all afternoon, something that made time disappear, something that left you feeling more like yourself than almost anything else. And then somewhere along the way you stopped. Life got busier. It started to feel indulgent. Someone made an offhand comment, or you compared yourself to someone else and decided you were not good enough. So you quietly set it down and kept walking. The Stoics would call this a small but serious betrayal, not of your talent, of your character. Because the things we love doing are rarely accidental. They point towards something essential in us. Something that wants expression, regardless of whether it earns money or praise. Epictetus was clear. External opinions are not yours to control. What is yours, entirely and irreversibly yours, is how you choose to spend the one life you have been given. Here is the modern trap. We turned hobbies into side hustles, passion into productivity, and somewhere in that process, we forgot that not everything needs to be optimized. Some things are worth doing simply because they make you feel alive. A painting you will never sell, a song you will never perform, a garden no one else will ever see. Research in positive psychology consistently shows that people who maintain creative or physical pursuits outside of work report higher life satisfaction, better stress resilience, and a stronger sense of identity. This is not a luxury. This is architecture. It is how you build a self that can weather the hard seasons. Ask yourself honestly, what did you used to love that you quietly abandoned? What lights something up in you when you even think about it? That is not nostalgia talking. That is something true trying to get your attention. You do not have to quit your job. You just have to give that thing a Tuesday evening, a Sunday morning, 20 minutes before the rest of the world wakes up. Start there. The joy will remember where it left off. And so will you. This next lesson changed how I see life. Lesson 6. Marcus Aurelius wrote something in his private journal that he never intended anyone else to read. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. That line is startling in its simplicity. After pages of wrestling with philosophy and duty and the nature of the universe, it comes down to that. Stop theorizing. Start acting. Be kind. Kindness gets a strange reputation today. It gets mistaken for weakness, for naivety, for the behavior of someone who has not yet learned how harsh the world can be. But the Stoics understood kindness as one of the highest expressions of strength. It takes discipline to be kind when someone is difficult. It takes courage to be generous when you feel depleted. It takes real character to treat a stranger with warmth when nothing in you is required to. And here is the part that might surprise you. Kindness is profoundly selfish in the best possible sense. When you act with generosity toward another person, your brain releases oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, the same neurochemical cocktail associated with deep satisfaction and well-being. You are literally making yourself happier by making someone else's day better. But beyond chemistry, there is something. Stoic philosophy points to that science is only beginning to articulate. We are social creatures woven into a fabric of mutual dependence. When we act in alignment with that truth, we feel it. There is a coherence, a rightness that settles into your body when you have been genuinely kind, and a low grinding dissonance when you have not. The practice is everywhere. It does not require grand gestures. Hold a door, ask someone how they are really doing, and then wait for the actual answer. Let someone merge in traffic without the internal monologue of injustice. Compliment something specific and true. Say thank you and mean it. These are not small things dressed up as big ones. They are quietly some of the most significant choices you make all day. Because every interaction is a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. Cast yours thoughtfully. Cast them often. Read that again mentally. Lesson 7. Here is a confession most people will not make out loud. The things they regret most are not the chances they took. They are the ones they did not take. The invitation they declined because they were tired. The trip they almost booked. The conversation they talked themselves out of starting. The version of their life that existed just one yes away from the one they are currently living. Comfort is seductive. The Stoics knew this well and warned against it constantly, not because comfort is evil, but because an excessive attachment to it quietly shrinks your world. You stop taking risks. You stop showing up in new rooms. You start organizing your life around the avoidance of discomfort instead of the pursuit of meaning. And meaning almost always lives just outside the boundary of what feels safe. Seneca wrote, "It is not that I am brave. It is that I know what is truly worth fearing, and a life half lived is near the top of that list." He understood that the real danger was not failure. It was the slow erosion of possibility that comes from defaulting to no. This does not mean say yes to everything. The Stoics were deeply intentional about where they directed their energy. The yes we are talking about here is the one your gut wants to say before your fear talks you out of it. The dinner with people you do not know yet. The class you have been curious about. The project that feels too big. The vulnerable conversation you have been postponing for months. Every yes you say to something new is a vote against stagnation. It is evidence that you trust yourself to handle what comes next, even if you do not know exactly what that is. And more often than not, the experience on the other side of that yes, however imperfect, however awkward, will give you something you did not have before: a story, a connection, a skill, a piece of yourself you did not know was missing. Your life is being written in real time. The plot depends entirely on the choices you make. Say yes more often and watch the story get more interesting. Lesson 8. The average person checks their phone over 90 times a day. 90 times. That is roughly once every 10 minutes during waking hours. And most of the time there is no particular reason, just a reflex, a reach, a moment of boredom or discomfort converted instantly into scrolling. We have built a civilization of distraction and called it connection. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." And he wrote that in the 2nd century, before notifications, before algorithms engineered to capture and hold your attention. He had no idea how relevant that line would become. Here is what happens when you put the phone down. The present comes back, slowly at first, then with a kind of richness that feels almost foreign. If you have been away from it for a while, you notice things: the quality of light in the room, the sound of the neighborhood settling in the evening, the thought you were about to have before the notification interrupted it. You remember that your mind, unprompted and unscrolled, is actually a remarkably interesting place to spend time. The Stoics practiced something called present moment awareness, a continuous gentle returning of attention to the here and now. It was not meditation in the way we typically picture it. It was a daily discipline of choosing presence over distraction repeatedly, with the understanding that your attention is the most valuable thing you own. Whatever it rests on grows. Whatever it ignores fades. The practice here is not perfection. It is not throwing your phone into a lake. It is intentional space. An hour in the evening without the screen. A meal where the phone stays in another room. A walk where you let your thoughts wander without a podcast to fill the silence. The silence is not empty. It is full of everything you have been too distracted to notice. Your own wants, your own ideas, your own life happening right now, asking for a little of your undivided attention. Give it that, even once a day. Your attention is your life. Whatever owns your attention owns you. Lesson 9. There is a particular kind of tired that sleep does not fix. You know the one. You wake up after 8 hours and still feel like you have been carrying something heavy for too long. It is not physical exhaustion. It is the accumulated weight of routine, of sameness, of days that blur into each other without any horizon to walk toward. The Stoics were not advocates for endless grinding. Seneca was explicit. Retire into yourself as much as possible. Rest was not weakness. It was wisdom. The mind that never rests eventually stops working well. Creativity dries up. Patience thins. The capacity for joy narrows to a point where even good things stop feeling good. Breaks restore something that productivity cannot manufacture. When you step away from your regular life, genuinely away, not just physically absent while mentally still at your desk, your brain enters a restorative mode that neuroscientists call the default mode network. This is where insight happens, where problems you have been forcing suddenly solve themselves, where your sense of who you are and what you actually want gets recalibrated. Travel in particular has a specific kind of power. It does not have to be expensive or exotic. A different town, a night somewhere you have never slept, a road taken without a destination fixed in advance. New environments force your brain off autopilot. You notice more, feel more, remember more. Time seems to expand. A week of travel feels longer and richer in memory than a month of identical routine. The Stoics encouraged the deliberate contemplation of change and impermanence. Travel does this naturally. It reminds you that the world is larger than your usual orbit, that other people live differently, value differently, see differently, that your problems, while real, are not the center of the universe. So plan the trip. Book the weekend. Take the afternoon. Not as an escape from your life, but as an investment in it. You will come back to the same desk, the same room, the same responsibilities. but you will come back as someone who has been reminded, however briefly, that life is larger than your current view of it. Think about that for a second. Lesson 10. The longest study on human happiness ever conducted is Harvard's nearly 90-year study of adult development. It arrived at a conclusion so simple it almost sounds too obvious to be profound. The quality of your relationships is the single greatest predictor of how happy and healthy you will be across your entire life. Not wealth, not achievement, not status, relationships. Seneca knew this long before the data existed to prove it. He said, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve." For the Stoics, relationships were not social obligations or background comforts. They were the actual material of a meaningful life. The people you choose to spend time with are, in a very real sense, choosing who you become. And yet modern life has constructed almost every condition necessary to make this harder. We are busier than ever, more connected digitally, and more isolated in person. We cancel plans without guilt and call texting staying in touch. We drift from people we love not out of conflict, but out of simple inertia, the slow accumulation of unreturned calls and postponed dinners until the distance feels normal. The Stoics would call this a failure of intentionality. You do not drift toward virtue, they argued, you choose it. And you do not drift toward deep relationships either. You build them deliberately, repeatedly, by showing up even when you are tired, by making the call even when there is nothing specific to say, by choosing the kitchen table over the couch and the device. Research shows that people who maintain regular, face-to-face contact with friends and family report lower rates of depression, faster recovery from illness, longer lives, and substantially higher daily mood. This is not metaphor, it is physiology. We are wired for each other, so think right now about someone you have been meaning to reach out to. Not tomorrow, not when things settle down, now. Send the message, make the plan. Show up in the life of someone who matters to you and let them show up in yours. There is almost nothing better for your happiness than the people who genuinely love you. Lesson 11. Here is a paradox worth sitting with. One of the fastest routes to feeling better about your own life is to stop focusing on it entirely and turn your attention towards someone else. The Stoics called this sympathia, the understanding that all human beings are connected, that we exist not as isolated individuals, but as nodes in a vast network of mutual responsibility. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea again and again. He wrote, "We were made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. When you help someone, you are not doing them a favor from a position of surplus. You are fulfilling a basic function of what it means to be human." And the research on this is some of the most consistent in all of positive psychology. Acts of service, volunteering, helping a neighbor, mentoring someone younger, donating time or resources produce measurable increases in well-being for the giver. It reduces anxiety. It creates what psychologists call a helper's high, a genuine neurochemical reward for pro-social behavior. The more regularly you help others, the more stable and purposeful your own life begins to feel. But beyond the science, there is something the Stoics understood that numbers cannot fully capture. Helping others connects you to a narrative larger than yourself. When your own life feels small or stuck or overwhelmingly heavy, service is one of the few things that consistently shifts perspective. You realize your problems are real but not total. You discover resources in yourself you did not know existed. You find, almost without looking for it, a reason to keep going. You do not need to volunteer every weekend. Start smaller. Help someone carry something. Offer your expertise to someone who needs it. Check in on the neighbor who has been quiet lately. Cook a meal for someone going through a hard time. The act does not have to be large. The shift it creates in you will be. Because when you move through the world as someone who helps, you stop being a passenger in your own life. You become someone whose presence matters. And that feeling that you matter that you contribute, is one of the deepest satisfactions a human being can experience. Lesson 12. Epictetus said it plainly. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. A line written 2,000 years ago that most people will spend their entire lives failing to actually practice. Here is the honest truth about the human brain. It is not naturally wired for gratitude. It is wired for threat detection, for comparison, for noticing what is absent or wrong or insufficient. This kept our ancestors alive in dangerous environments. It is considerably less useful when you are lying awake at 2 in the morning, mentally cataloging everything your life is missing. Gratitude is not a feeling that arrives on its own. It is a practice, a discipline, a deliberate retraining of the lens through which you see your days. The Stoics practiced a version of it called negative visualization, not as a pessimistic exercise, but as a way to fully appreciate what they already had. They would imagine losing something they valued, a relationship, their health, their freedom, not to dwell in fear, but to feel viscerally the weight of what they already possessed before it was gone. Try it now. Think about something in your life you take completely for granted. Someone you love, the fact that your body is mostly working, a home that keeps you warm, a skill you have spent years developing. Now imagine it gone. Feel that for 10 seconds. That ache you just felt. That is the love you already have for something you stopped noticing. Research in positive psychology shows that people who regularly practice gratitude report significantly higher well-being, stronger immune systems, better sleep, more compassion, and less envy. It is one of the most powerful psychological interventions ever studied, and it costs nothing but attention. Tonight, before you sleep, name 3 things you are genuinely grateful for. Not the same 3 you always name. Go specific. Go unusual. Find something new to see. Because the life you are living right now, in this moment, is full of things worth rejoicing over. You just have to remember to look. And now the hardest one. The one most people skip past because it asks the most of them. Let go of grudges. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." He wrote this as a man who had genuine enemies, people who betrayed him, schemed against him, tried to undermine everything he built. He had every justification in the world to hold those grievances tight and call it justice. And he chose not to. Not because the wrongs were not real, but because he understood something profound. The grudge always hurts the person holding it more than the person it is aimed at. Think about someone you are still angry at, someone from years ago. You can picture their face. You remember exactly what they said, exactly how it made you feel. And they, in all likelihood, have moved on. They are living their life, probably not thinking about you at all, while you are still carrying the weight of what they did in the architecture of your everyday emotions. The grudge has not imprisoned them. It has imprisoned you. This is not a call to pretend harm did not happen. The Stoics were not naive. They believed strongly in justice, in naming wrongdoing clearly and without flinching. But they also believed in the love of fate, the acceptance of what has already occurred as an immovable fact. You cannot change what happened. You can only choose what you do with the energy you have been spending on resentment. Forgiveness is not absolution. It is not telling someone that what they did was acceptable. It is a decision you make for yourself to stop paying rent in your own mind to someone who has already left the building. It is at its core an act of self-respect. Now look back at the path you have walked through this video: laughter, nature, early mornings, purposeful days, doing what you love, being kind, saying yes, presence, rest, connection, service, gratitude, release. Every single one of these things is asking you to do the same thing in a different form. To stop outsourcing your happiness to circumstances, to other people, to the future, to the past, and to choose it right now in the life you already have. The Stoics did not promise that this was easy. They promised it was possible. And they lived it through illness, through loss, through exile, through the collapse of everything they thought was permanent. They found happiness not because the world cooperated with them, but because they stopped waiting for it to. You do not need a perfect life to be happy. You need a practice life. One day your life will become a memory, a name, a photograph, a voice nobody hears anymore. So stop waiting for permission to live. Stop postponing peace. Build it now. Start today with one thing from this list. Then another. Then another. The life you want is not waiting somewhere ahead of you. It is being built right now from the choices you are making today. If you are ready to stop chasing and start building, write this in the comments. I build my own peace. Subscribe to Stoic Path and turn on notifications. Because what we are building here, one lesson at a time, is something worth showing up for. Thank you for watching. Stay intentional. Stay grounded. See you in the next one.